Talent shows for entertainment? Think again. Today, I'm breaking down performers whose big break ended live in front of a horrified audience. Hi, I'm Nathan, and welcome to Fatal Files. From a dancer who spun through fire wearing a costume she had been warned about, to an aerialist who trusted her safety rig until a single missing piece sent her crashing down in front of the crowd. It was June 18, 2017, on the east side of Mesa, Arizona. A community sports complex had been converted into an evening of outdoor performance venue. The temperature had peaked that afternoon and hadn't meaningfully dropped by showtime. For a fire performance, that kind of calm air is usually perfect. There's no wind to push the flames around and nothing unexpected to deal with. Connie Briggs was 27 years old and taught dance classes during the week, contemporary and Latin styles, at a local studio where she had built a small but loyal student base. On weekends and evenings, she performed fire routines at festivals and outdoor shows around the greater Phoenix area. She had been doing it for a few years by then, and she was good at it. In the weeks leading up to the Mesa show, Connie had been reworking her costume specifically to maximize how it read on video. She settled on a jacket made from synthetic fringe, material that fans out dramatically when you spin, catches stage light in every direction, and looks striking through a camera lens. A fellow performer raised a direct concern. Synthetic fringe doesn't just burn, it melts, and when it melts, it adheres to skin. It was a warning given by someone who was really concerned. Connie heard it, but she didn't listen. She still kept the jacket. The look was her main priority. I agree with Connie that looks are important, especially in performances. But what I didn't like was that she still pushed to wear the costume even though someone had already warned her. Her fire prop was a 36-inch steel hoop fitted with 4 Kevlar wicks, soaked in white gas minutes before her entry. 2 teenage volunteers stood nearby, each holding a handheld fire extinguisher. Neither had gone through a hands-on rehearsal, only a verbal briefing on what to do if something went wrong. There were no fire blankets staged within immediate reach, and no one assigned specifically to deploy one. I once had the chance to watch this kind of performance, and even now it still leaves me in awe. Several audience members were already recording when she took the field. She worked through her opening sequence cleanly, spinning the hoop around her torso, flames arcing outward, the fringe jacket catching light exactly as she had designed. From a distance, it looked exactly how she had intended. Then she set up for a jump-through move, stepping back and launching herself through the rotating hoop. During the pass, a lower wick caught the fringe along the back of the jacket. Ignition was immediate. Synthetic fringe doesn't smolder, it goes fast and wide. Within seconds, the back of the jacket was fully involved. The material melted into the skin along her back as flames spread upward toward her shoulders and neck. She dropped the hoop and tried to smother the fire with her hands, but it only caused secondary burns and did little to slow the flames. The first volunteer discharged their extinguisher, but the angle was off. Critical seconds passed before the suppression became effective. Instead of a fire blanket that could have been wrapped and sealed around the burn area, both volunteers relied entirely on extinguishers. The second volunteer followed. Together they brought the flames down, but the burns had already reached her back, shoulders, neck, and lower face. Melted fabric had fused to the skin across multiple areas. She was still conscious when bystanders reached her. Disoriented, but conscious. Emergency services were called, and she was transported in critical condition. Physicians intubated her shortly after arrival. Airway swelling from inhaled superheated air was progressing rapidly, and the tissue damage was severe enough that her airway could not be trusted to stay open on its own. Her condition deteriorated through the night. Burn shock set in, and the combined physiological load of extensive surface burns and inhalation injury overwhelmed her system. Connie Briggs was pronounced dead the following day due to complications from burn shock and inhalation injury. Investigators cited flammable costume material as a primary contributing factor, alongside the safety team's complete lack of hands-on preparation. Investigators also noted the absence of any formal fire safety protocol for the event itself. The event organizers were cited for failing to meet basic public safety requirements, and the venue was barred from hosting performances involving open flame until updated safety standards could be verified and met. Having the right equipment means nothing if the people holding it have never used it. That gap between presence and preparation is entirely avoidable. And in this story, It wasn't. Now, what I find interesting about the next case is that the danger didn't come from a prop. It came from a decision made backstage, one that everyone in the room would spend a long time thinking about afterward. It was March 3rd, 2015, in a small rented event hall in Savannah, Georgia, set up for an amateur performance showcase. A modest space with a portable stage and tightly packed folding chairs, holding around 80 people. A friend of the performer sat in the front row, phone ready to record. The atmosphere was relaxed and informal. No one in that room expected what was about to happen. Jalen Croft was 22 years old and worked as a server at a restaurant in the Savannah area. Long shifts, late hours, kind of job that leaves you physically tired but mentally looking for something that feels like yours. For Jalen, that thing was performance. She had been teaching herself stunts and variety acts through online tutorials for a couple of years, working through progressions on her own time, in her own space, without formal instruction or a mentor who could tell her when she was ready and when she wasn't. Sword swallowing was the act she had been building toward. It is one of the most anatomically unforgiving performance skills that exists, not because it requires extraordinary strength or coordination, but because the margin between a successful pass and a perforation is measured in fractions of an inch, and the body's natural reflexes work against you every step of the way. Practitioners who do it professionally spend months, sometimes longer, training with progressively longer implements under careful supervision, learning to read the internal feedback their body gives them at each stage. Jalen had been practicing on her own with a shorter blade, one she had worked up to gradually and felt comfortable with. For the March 3rd show, she brought a 20-inch steel sword. It was longer than anything she had fully inserted before. She had never rehearsed at that depth under performance conditions. I don't think Jalen would walk into that room believing she was unprepared. I'm sure she felt ready. That's why she pushed it. Her friend was recording from the front row when Jalen began the attempt. She tilted her head back, neutralizing the natural curve of the throat, and began lowering the blade. The early descent, past the tongue, past the soft palate, into the upper esophagus, went without visible difficulty. Witnesses described her movements as slow and deliberate, the posture controlled. The blade continued descending. The handle approached her lips, which told anyone watching who understood the act that the sword was now further than her usual practice depth. She shifted her stance slightly, a small forward adjustment, the kind of micro movement that happens naturally when you're concentrating on something internal. That shift changed the angle, not dramatically, not visibly, just enough. There was a brief moment of resistance, according to the recording reviewed afterward. Then, she began withdrawing the blade. When it cleared her mouth, there was blood on the steel. A small amount at first, enough that her friend lowered the phone. Within seconds, it became more. Jalen coughed. More blood followed. Her color changed visibly, the kind of pale that moves across a face quickly when something internal is bleeding. She reached for the edge of the stage and did not find it in time. She went down. Audience members moved toward her immediately. Someone called emergency services. She was conscious when paramedics arrived and was transported to a regional medical facility where internal injury was suspected from the outset. Imaging confirmed what the blood had already suggested, a perforation consistent with esophageal trauma. Further examination indicated the blade had also torn into a major vessel within the chest cavity, allowing blood to rapidly fill the surrounding space. Emergency surgery was attempted. The rate of internal bleeding was severe from the start, far beyond what is typically seen in an isolated esophageal tear, and the complications that developed during and after the procedure moved faster than the surgical team could manage. Jalen Croft died several hours after being admitted. Cause of death was recorded as hemorrhagic shock due to combined esophageal perforation and major vascular injury. The investigation reviewed the recording from her friend's phone, which captured the full sequence, including the moment the depth exceeded what her body could tolerate. The event organizers faced scrutiny for the absence of any vetting process for performers attempting high-risk acts. Nothing beats a real trainer. Jalen put in the time and effort, but effort alone can't bridge the gap between a shorter blade and a longer one. Only a true trainer can. The next case I want to get into is louder and messier, with a crowd that had no idea the person performing was already running out of time before they ever walked on stage. It was September 9th, 2016 in Dayton, Ohio. The kind of late summer evening where the air still held heat from the afternoon, warm, a little stale indoors, the kind of atmosphere that makes a crowd restless and expectant. The venue was a small indoor performance space, the kind that hosts local talent showcases and independent acts. Nicholas Vance was 34 years old. He worked in landscaping, operating gas-powered equipment most of his working life. Chainsaws weren't intimidating to him. They were tools he handled the way most people handle a kitchen knife. Routine, familiar. He had built a side identity around that familiarity. In his off hours, he performed chainsaw juggling at local events, a niche act that earned him a reputation among people who followed that kind of underground performance circuit. Nicholas had a personality that leaned hard into authenticity. He wasn't flashy in the conventional sense. His whole identity as a performer was built around one idea: real tools, real stakes, no shortcuts. He genuinely believed that modified or safety-adjusted equipment cheapened what he was doing. To him, the danger wasn't a side effect, it was the point. For this particular show, he brought 3 gas-powered chainsaws, each fitted with 16-inch bars. Before going on, he mechanically locked the throttles open on all 3 saws, keeping the engines revving so the chains would continue spinning continuously, even when not actively gripped. This meant the chains never idled down between throws, removing any momentary pause that could have reduced contact severity. He told people backstage that modifications defeated the purpose. I understand the mindset, even if I think it was wrong. There's something in certain performers that treats risk as proof of mastery, but there's a line between confidence and overestimation, and Nicholas had crossed it before he ever stepped on that stage. He opened the act with all 3 saws running. The cascade pattern he used, a 3-object juggling sequence where each tool rotates through the air in a continuous loop, required precise timing and clean catches. He had done it before. The first several cycles held. The rhythm was there. The crowd was watching. Then, one of the saws came down unevenly. Instead of arriving handle first at the expected angle, it rotated slightly off and descended blade first. Nicholas reacted the way any experienced handler would, instinctively, immediately. He reached to correct it. His forearm intercepted the chain. The cut was immediate and serious. What happened next is where everything collapsed. A trained response in that moment would be to step back, let the remaining saws drop, and disengage. But Nicholas didn't step away. Because the throttles were locked open, the saw remained at full speed as it shifted in his grip, offering no reduction in chain movement. The saw that had injured his forearm shifted upward as he moved. The running chain contacted the side of his neck. The laceration was deep. He stumbled backward and went down within seconds. The remaining 2 saws fell onto the stage and continued spinning at full throttle after impact before going still. The audience didn't move at first. Several witnesses later described a moment of collective uncertainty. People genuinely unsure whether what they were watching was part of the performance. That hesitation lasted long enough to matter. Staff reached the stage and shut off the saws. Emergency services were called. Nicholas Vance was pronounced dead at the scene. The cause was catastrophic blood loss from the neck laceration. Investigators confirmed that all 3 saws had their throttles mechanically fixed in the open position prior to the performance, preventing the chains from slowing when not actively controlled. They also flagged the proximity of the audience, 8 feet from the stage with no protective barrier, as a secondary concern. Organizers acknowledged that no formal safety review had been conducted before the act was approved. No one had checked the equipment. The official findings were clear. The death resulted from continuously powered chains due to throttle modification and uncontrolled failure mid-performance, and the performer's decision to intervene rather than disengage. His equipment was recovered and documented. The event was not held again at that venue. The thing Nicholas leaves us with in his story is that risk without boundaries isn't bravery. It's recklessness. Confidence should never replace caution. We've got more disturbing talent show tragedies coming up, so hit that subscribe button if you want to see how moments meant for applause turned into something far more deadly. It was November 12th, 2018, in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The venue was an indoor event space with temporary staging and portable flooring panels laid in sections across the main floor. The crowd was loud and judging live. It was a breakdancing competition, and the energy was high and competitive. Angel Dalton was 19 years old. He trained with a local breakdance crew and had been working toward this kind of event for a while. By every account from people who knew him, he was disciplined and serious about his craft, not reckless in the way people sometimes assume young competitors are. Angel had been told and had seen for himself that longer headspins consistently drew stronger crowd reactions, and in this competition, crowd reaction fed directly into the live judging scores. That feedback loop shaped how he prepared. He knew what the ceiling looked like, and he trained to reach it. For presentation purposes, he also chose not to wear protective padding. It would have affected the visual. In a competition judged partly on appearance, that felt like a reasonable trade-off to him. His friends set up to record from multiple angles. They were there to capture something worth keeping. I can't blame him for chasing the longer headspins, hearing the crowd pushing him. Every cheer was like fuel. When his turn came, he moved through his opening sequence cleanly. The transitions were sharp. He was performing well. Then, he dropped into the headspin, balancing on the crown of his head, body extended, using core control and momentum to maintain rotation. It stabilized. Then, it accelerated. The crowd responded. The energy in the room pushed back at him like a wall of noise. He passed his normal threshold and kept going. 20 seconds in, he was still rotating. That's well beyond what most performers sustain in competition. His body was working hard to hold the position, micro-corrections happening constantly just to keep him centered. Then, his position began to drift. Slowly, maybe only a few inches, but enough. The crown of his head caught on a seam between two of the portable stage panels. At that speed, his head was acting as the pivot point of the spin. The entire rotation centered through that contact point. When the seam interrupted it, even slightly, it created sudden friction that resisted the motion. His head's rotation slowed abruptly, while the rest of his body still carried angular momentum. For a split second, his body kept turning, while his head didn't. The rotation didn't dissipate, it transferred. That mismatch forced a violent torsion through his neck as the spine absorbed the difference between a moving body and a suddenly slowed anchor point. He lost the axis. His body torqued off center and collapsed sideways. His head struck the stage at an angle, and the impact drove a violent lateral bend through his neck. He stopped moving immediately. The crowd didn't process it right away. The noise shifted, not silence exactly, but a different kind of sound. Confused. Then, someone close to the stage understood what they were looking at, and the room changed completely. Emergency responders arrived and found Angel unresponsive on the stage. He was pronounced dead at the scene. The official cause of death was catastrophic cervical spine injury. Investigators reviewed the recordings his friends had captured from multiple angles. The footage showed the drift, the catch on the panel seam, the momentary deceleration of the head against the seam while the body continued rotating, the loss of balance, and the impact. All of it was there. Investigators cited two contributing factors in their findings: the uneven surface created by the portable panel seams and the prolonged duration of the rotation itself. His teammates confirmed afterward that he had pushed past his normal limits that night, specifically because of the scoring dynamic. Longer meant higher, and he was trying to win. The stage setup was flagged. No barriers or surface inspections had been conducted prior to the event. If you are Angel, would you also do what he did? Before I get into this next case, I want you to think about something. How much trust we put into equipment we never actually check. Because this next story is entirely about that gap between assumption and verification. It was August 25, 2016, in Fresno, California. An indoor stage hosted a fast-paced local showcase with back-to-back acts. The floor was hard, no mats, though the ceiling allowed aerial work. The act was approved. What the venue lacked was any formal process for checking the rigging. Jennifer Kress was 31 years old. She worked in aerial performance, trapeze specifically, and had been training and performing for years. People who knew her described her as focused and technically capable. This wasn't someone new to the discipline. She understood rigging, she understood load dynamics, and under normal circumstances, she was careful about her setup. That context matters, because what happened that night wasn't a product of ignorance. It was a product of pressure. Between acts, Jennifer and a friend began assembling her portable trapeze rig on the stage. Portable rigs are designed to be broken down and reassembled, which means every connection point has to be secured correctly every single time. One of the upper joints was fitted with a bolt, but was missing its locking nut, the component that keeps the bolt from backing out under repeated movement and load. The bolt was hand-tightened. That was the only thing holding that joint together. Before the assembly could be completed and inspected, they were called to begin. The schedule was running and there was no buffer left. The rig had not been load tested. The missing locking nut had not been caught. They moved forward. I don't think Jennifer was reckless. She was just under pressure and short on time, and made the decision that most people would make. She mounted the trapeze at approximately 12 feet above the stage and began her routine. The opening swings were controlled, building height gradually with each pass the way aerial performers do when they're warming into a sequence. From the audience, nothing looked wrong. The rig appeared stable. The performance was proceeding normally. The crowd was engaged. There was no reason for anyone in that room to feel anything other than anticipation. What was happening at the joint was not visible from the floor. Every swing placed dynamic load on the connection, not static weight, but the kind of shifting directional force that multiplies with movement. Under that repeated stress, the hand-tightened bolt began to back out, slowly, incrementally. The joint was separating with each pass, and nobody in that room could see it. There was no sound, no visible wobble, no warning that anyone standing at floor level could have caught and acted on in time. On a backward swing, the connection failed completely. The crossbar detached. The momentum of that swing carried her body forward as the support vanished, rotating her downward. She fell head and neck first from 12 feet, with the arc of motion driving the impact directly into the stage. Parts of the rig came down moments after she did. The collapse was captured on multiple phones from different positions in the crowd. There was no ambiguity in the footage about what had happened or how fast it unfolded. Emergency responders arrived and pronounced Jennifer dead at the scene. The cause of death was severe head trauma from the impact with the hard stage surface. Investigators recovered the bolt from the scene and confirmed the locking nut was absent. The co-assembler who had helped Jennifer set up the rig stated that they had intended to secure the joint fully but ran out of time before being called to start. Organizers confirmed that no safety inspection of the rig had been conducted prior to the performance. No one had signed off on the setup. No one had checked. The missing locking nut was documented as the primary mechanical cause of the failure. The investigation concluded that the collapse was directly attributable to an incomplete assembly carried out under time pressure, on a stage with no mat, with no inspection process in place. The venue updated its policies following the incident. Several other local showcases in the area quietly revised their equipment inspection procedures in the months that followed. The portable rig was retained as evidence. I've realized that experience can make things feel routine, and sometimes it is easy for us to skip steps. But experience doesn't prevent failure. It actually makes discipline even more important.